Today, we're looking at a script for video called Every Fish Explained in 5 Minutes. It's trying to profile everything from bluefin tuna to rohu, covering biology, history, culinary uses, the works.
That is a massive amount of information to try and cram into such a short runtime.
It is, and since the listener really wants us to be robust and impactful, we're just going to skip the pleasantries and get straight to work.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the biggest hurdle standing between this script and a great video is, I think, structural cohesion. Right now, it just feels like we're reading a dictionary.
It is absolutely suffering from encyclopedicism. The facts are accurate, sure, but the flow, it's not existent.
Right?
You have salmon, then tuna, then catfish, then something else. It feels completely arbitrary. You're asking the audience to reset their context every 30 seconds.
Which is just exhausting. It reads like a laundry list. I mean, we have the factual density, the prices, the history, all of that is there.
The research is solid.
But there's no narrative glue.
And that's the friction point. The fix isn't just about, smoother transitions.
No, it's about architectural restructuring. We need to stop listing fish and start grouping them by theme.
Okay, if you shuffle the deck, you stop delivering isolated fact, and you start building an actual argument about how humans interact with the ocean.
Let's look at the first big opportunity for that, the empire builders.
I love this concept. In the current draft, cod and herring are pages apart.
Yeah.
But if you look at the notes, they're two sides of the same coin. The text says cod shaped entire economies in the North Atlantic and even sparked wars.
And herring is described as the silver of the sea, that it drove the economy of Northern Europe.
Right. So why are they separated by 5 other fish?
It makes no sense.
Put them together. When you contrast them, you aren't just talking about biology anymore. You're telling a story. The geopolitics of protein.
I like that.
You have cod driving exploration across the Atlantic versus herring solidifying domestic stability in Europe. Suddenly, the script isn't about fish. It's about how civilization was built on these two species.
That elevates the material immediately. It gives the viewer a real reason to care about the history.
Exactly.
Okay. Another grouping that stood out to me involves the farmed versus wild dynamic.
The modern food system comment.
Right. Currently, the script mentions farm-raised salmon in Norway and Chile.
And then later, completely separately, it talks about catfish farming in Mississippi to avoid the muddy taste of wild.
They're two pieces of the same puzzle.
100%. If you group salmon and catfish, you can have a fascinating discussion about the necessity of aquaculture.
Okay.
You contrast the massive industrial net pens of the Atlantic with the pond farming of the American South. It transforms the segment from a biology lesson into a debate.
A debate on how we feed the planet.
And it solves the problem of that muddy taste comment feeling so random.
It becomes a specific detail about why we farm in the first place.
Precisely. And there's one more group that really needs to be pulled out of the shadow, the invisible staples.
You're thinking of Alaska pollock and anchovies?
Of course. The script notes that pollock is the most harvested fish that nobody knows by name. It's the block of white meat in the Filet-O-Fish, it's imitation crab.
And anchovies are dissolving into Caesar dressings everywhere.
But right now, they're treated just like the hero fish.
Which completely misses the irony.
It does. These are the fish we eat the most but see the least. Grouping them highlights the theme of hidden industrial food source. That's a much more compelling hook than just listing their habitat.
Here are the fish you ate today without even knowing it.
That sticks.
So step 1 is reorganize the whole deck into these clusters. But once we have the structure, we have to look at the individual profiles. And this brings us to the second major issue.
The so what?
This is all about the hook. The current draft buries the lead constantly. It tends to start with these generic descriptions.
Yeah.
The tuna section opens with, tuna is one of the most commercially valuable fish.
Which is technically true, but it's a snooze. It's a textbook opening.
Especially when, 3 sentences later, the script mentions that a single bluefin sold for over $3 million at an auction in Japan.
That is the opener. You have to grab the audience by the collar. Don't tell me it's valuable.
Tell me it costs more than a Ferrari.
Yes. Start the section with, this is a fish that costs $3 million.
And then immediately hit them with the conflict that they are endangered due to overfishing.
Boom. Now you have tension. You have a fish that's too expensive to eat, yet we are hunting it to extinction. That's a narrative conflict between greed and survival.
Right.
If you lead with biology, you lose them. If you lead with the stakes, they'll listen to the biology to understand why it's worth that much.
It changes the energy completely. Let's try this hook-first approach on the fish that isn't worth millions. Let's look at barramundi.
Okay, barramundi, the sustainable alternative. The text notes it lives in both freshwater and saltwater.
Which is a cool biological fact, but the script presents it so dryly.
So dry. We need to frame barramundi as the eco-warrior or the survivor, because it can live anywhere. It represents the future of farming.
Ah, okay.
Unlike salmon, which needs specific cold water, or cod, which is wild-caught, barramundi is kind of the engineered solution to the protein crisis.
So the hook is, this is the fish that might just save the future of farming.
Yes, frame it as the protagonist in the fight against food insecurity. Give the fish a character.
Okay, and then we have tilapia. The text notes it was raised by Egyptians 4,000 years ago.
But today the scriptures calls it a low-cost, everyday fish with a neutral flavor.
Talk about a rebranding opportunity.
It's a tragedy. Start with the pharaohs. This was a fish fit for kings and pyramids.
And now?
Now, it's the standard for generic white meat in the frozen aisle. The hook here is the fall from grace. You question how a fish with such a deep history became the definition of boring. It adds this layer of irony that actually makes its neutral flavor interesting.
That's a very effective way to make the content stick. It stops being a list of features.
And starts being a series of stories.
Now I want to move to the third area of critique, which is about the sensory experience.
This is where the script feels a bit thin. The culinary description, they're repetitive. We hear white, mild, flaky over and over again.
Yeah, it relies heavily on listing dishes eaten in Vietnam, popular in Portugal, without explaining why those dishes exist.
It treats fish as commodities, not cultural touchstone. We need to get visceral here.
Let's look at the entry for rohu. This is a freshwater carp from South Asia. The text explicitly says it is prized for its bones in Bengali cuisine.
And that detail is currently buried in a list of preparation methods. That needs to be the star.
Right.
To a Western palate, bones are a defect. In Bengal, they are a feature.
So focusing on the texture of the bones, that changes the perspective.
Absolutely. Describe the crunch. Describe the pressure cooking that turns the bone into, marrow-rich butter. If you explain that the bone is the point of the dish, you're teaching the audience something profound about that culture.
You're moving past white and mild into a unique sensory experience.
It transforms a textural flaw into a cultural asset.
Yeah.
Same thing with mackerel. The text notes it has a bold, rich flavor and spoils quickly.
And because it spoils quickly, the script lists the preservation methods: smoking, salting, canning.
But it treats those as just recipes.
Right.
The saba in Japan or the smoked mackerel in the UK isn't just a random preference. It's a survival mechanism. The biology dictates the menu.
So the critique here is to make that causal link explicit.
Right. The oiliness of the meat mandates the smoking. If you explain why the culture developed that way, the script becomes so much smarter. You're not just listing smoked mackerel, you're explaining the anthropology of the fish.
Okay, and then we have anchovies. The script calls them polarizing and having intensely salty umami.
This is the love it or hate it fish. I wonder if we can lean harder into that divisiveness.
How so?
Well, the text mentions fresh anchovies, or boquerones, marinated in vinegar, and those are mild and delicate.
Which is a huge contrast to the salt-cured version on a pizza.
Exactly. The weakness here is treating them as one monolithic thing. The suggestion is to show the duality. Contrast the fresh, delicate, vinegar-cured fish against the salt balm from the can.
Don't just list it as a pizza topping.
Explain that the anchovy most people hate is actually a preserved version of a fish that's totally different in its natural state.
It adds nuance. It might even convert some haters if they realize the fresh ones are different.
It creates a umali grenade narrative versus a delicate fillet narrative. It's much more engaging.
Okay, so we've covered structure, hooks, and sensory details. Now we have to talk about the final piece of the puzzle, pacing.
This is about respecting the listener's energy. The current draft just runs at a constant speed. Every fish gets roughly the same word count, the same emotional weight.
The 5-minute concept suggests speed, but you can't treat a massive historical tragedy the same way you treat a fish stick.
Precisely. We need to adopt a zoom-in, zoom-out approach. You have to vary the length and depth based on the complexity of the story.
Okay, so let's look at cod again, the collapse of the North Atlantic fishery in the 1990s.
That was a devastation. It ended a way of life for thousands of people. The script needs to zoom in there.
It needs to slow down.
Stop the momentum. Let that silence hang. You have to emphasize the gravity of losing a resource that shaped the modern world. If you rush past it to get to the next fish, you rob the moment of its impact.
It just needs to feel heavier than the rest of the script.
Yes, but then you have the zoom out opportunity with something like Pangasius.
The text mentions it's a similar species to catfish, exported from Vietnam.
Right. We don't need a full bio here. We don't need the history of the Mekong Delta.
So just a quick comparison.
Make it rapid fire. In the U.S., we have catfish. In Vietnam, they have Pangasius. It's cheaper, it's exported, it's everywhere. Boom, done.
That contrast in speed keeps the listener awake. If cod is a slow burn, Pangasius is a sprint.
And there's one more pacing nuance in the tuna section regarding albacore versus bluefin.
The text lists bluefin, yellowfin, and albacore, but it just lists them as varieties.
That's a missed opportunity for a zoom in on consumer confusion. The script needs to pause and clarify which tuna goes into the can versus the auction block.
Because the consumer might be confused why their $2 can of tuna is related to that $3 million fish we talked about earlier.
Exact. Zoom in on that distinction. Explain that albacore is the chicken of the sea, dry, white, canned, while bluefin is the diamond of the ocean, fatty, red, raw.
It creates a valuable aha moment.
And it clears up the confusion immediately.
This has been a very productive critique. We've covered a lot of ground.
It really highlights that having good facts is only half the battle. The architecture of the script is what delivers the value.
So, let's recap the main points for our listener to make sure they have a clear roadmap for the rewrite. First, structure.
Stop the laundry list. Group your fish into thematic clusters. Use the empire builders for cod and herring to talk about history. Use the invisible staples for pollock and anchovies to talk about industry. Make the connections for the audience.
Second, the hook. Stop burying the lead.
If a fish costs $3 million, say that first. If a fish was eaten by pharaohs, say that first. Find the tension. Price, survival, history. Put it right at the very top of the paragraph.
Third, sensory details.
Get visceral. Don't rely on generic adjectives like white and mild. Talk about the crunch of the rohu bone, the muddiness of wild catfish, the salt bomb of the anchovy. Make the audience taste it.
And finally, pacing.
Zoom in and zoom out. Give the tragedies like the cod collapse the breathing room they deserve, and speed through the commodities like Pangasius to keep the energy up.
The actionable takeaway for you today is this. Don't try to rewrite the whole thing at once. Take your 3 strongest entries, probably cod, tuna, and salmon, and rewrite them first using this new hook-first structure.
Once you nail the tone on those 3, the rest of the script will naturally fall into line. Set the bar high with the empire builders and the $1 million fish.
We would love to see how this evolves. We specifically want to see how you handle the grouping of the invisible fish, like pollock and anchovies, in your next draft.
Yeah.
That synthesis of industrial food sources is a tricky bit of writing. But if you pull it off, it will be the highlight of the video.
I'm really curious to see if they can make the invisible visible. That's a great writing challenge.
Please resubmit the revised script once you've made those changes. Good luck with the edit.
We look forward to reading it.